All right, we should be recording. Very good.
Awesome. Sounds great.
So, who are you?
So who am I? My name is Dave. I own and operate ODG Apparel. It's an online Christian apparel company. We're about a year and a half old, and yeah, that's what I'm about. I have two kids, two young kids, a beautiful wife, an elder at my church, and just kind of had this idea a few years ago to get started trying to play around with the idea of what would it look like to create Christian apparel and Christian stuff in general that wasn't necessarily just the same run-of-the-mill stuff we were seeing.
Yeah, your stuff is awesome, by the way, too. That I have no
Thank you.
problem plugging your site, by the way, through this because this stuff is awesome. And like I said, evangelism is a big part of what like the Lord's Army is all about, anyway. And your stuff makes it easy. It's a sort of a fun way, especially for like an introvert like myself, where it's super awkward just to walk up to people and start talking about things.
Oh, for sure.
You've got the you provide the conversation starter anyway.
Yes, that's really the kind of the whole heart. It's funny because that wasn't the heart behind it originally. The heart behind it originally was just a fun idea that some friends and I had when we were in college, and then it kind of evolved over time to realize, wait, there's a lot of this is more than just a fun idea. There's something powerful about this as well.
Exactly. So how did the idea start?
So I was a religion philosophy major in college with at a non-Christian school. And so friends and I would always joke around and say things like, oh, I'm reading one of those old dead guys. We would talk about like Spurgeon and John Calvin and Martin Luther, and we'd refer to these dead theologians as ODGs, or old dead guys, or old dead gangsters. We used to joke around and say, man, these guys were so bold with their faith. They were so like tough and like willing to risk their lives for the way that they preached the gospel. So we would call them gangsters, like OGs, you know? And then it evolved into ODGs and all kinds of stuff. And then I thought, oh man, it was so funny to have a shirt with Charles Spurgeon's face on it with the word gangster underneath it. And so the first shirt I ever made was a portrait of Charles Spurgeon with just a cursive of the word gangster. So that was like the first line that we kind of came up with, and I just decided to do it one day, and then that evolved into, I had so many people who would ask me about the shirt, who would be like, oh, that's so cool, I don't get the shirt. And I'd be in like these awkward situations where I had to like explain who Charles Spurgeon was and why I thought he was a gangster. And then like I'd end up preaching the gospel, and I thought, wow, this could be really cool, and that kind of evolved into where we're at today.
No doubt whatsoever that Charles Spurgeon is that original OG. For sure.
He is. Totally is.
Very cool. So, all right. So it's sort of morphed out of college. How long what was the journey like? Like, how long was it? Was it you had the idea and then boom, instantly it's a company, or was it a long road?
So no, it's funny because I had that idea in college, what 10 years ago, and it just sort of happened like 2 years ago that I decided to make the shirt. And then we made the shirt. I made the shirt just kind of for the fun of it. And then I've just always been sort of a serial kind of entrepreneur, and had always really seen the Lord using me in business and different things like that. And so I was reading a book one day, and they were talking about businesses and starting businesses, and I just thought, man, that was a cool idea. I wonder if we could do that. And so I just started playing around with what would it look like to start a t-shirt company, and then the t-shirt company evolved into stickers and mugs and everything else. And so it's been a long 2 years or so, year and a half, 2 years, of a lot of learning and a lot of figuring it out, but it's been a lot of fun as well.
So you're a family man. I think everybody in my ministry. I have three little kids, married of course, and so tell me, how was that? How was that? How was the conversation with the wife? That's an ever important conversation, right? How did that go? Were you like, hey, I think I want to start something. Let's take a bunch of our money out of savings and put it into it. I mean, how was that?
Yeah, so it's interesting because when I first started it, I actually owned and operated a bunch of smoothie places. So I had about 7 smoothie shops that I owned and operated, and this was sort of like a passion project while I was owning and operating those, something I did for like fun on the side. And then we ended up exiting and selling that business about a year and a half ago, and that's when I really was like, oh, well, I have the time and I have the energy. And so at the beginning, it was kind of like, yeah, that's cool. My wife was like, yeah, sure, have fun with it. And it's not a real business, have fun with it.
Sure.
And then over the last year and a half, it's become that. And so we've had to have that conversation almost like over the last year and a half of like, oh, wow, this is like a legitimate thing that you're doing, huh? And I'm like, yeah, I really enjoy it. I really think it's fun. And so she's on board. She helps a ton with it. And she's just as much involved in it as I am.
Very cool. Very cool. So to give an idea, I think we talked about the Spurgeon shirt. I think one of my favorite, in terms of evangelistic, just somebody walking up to you in a Chipotle type situation is the yellow paint. Just, I love that story so much. What is the yellow paint story? Let's sort of pitch that design for those who don't know.
For sure. So one of the designs we have is a design very, very simple. It just says, "Don't eat yellow paint." And so the way that we use that design the most is it's simply just a yellow paint blotch on a shirt, and it's just kind of written in the text, "Don't eat yellow paint." And so that story comes from a story that's kind of thrown around online a lot. It's kind of been like a viral story online of Van Gogh, the famous painter, wanting to late in life eat yellow paint because he was so depressed that he thought it would make him happy. And so that could be a true story. It could not be a false story. We have people tell us all the time, that's not a true story, or this, that, and the other thing. It honestly doesn't matter. The truth of it is the same. And so he was pursuing life. He was pursuing happiness in this thing called paint, this yellow paint. And we hear that and we think, that's so insane. Why would he think that yellow paint's going to make him happy? And yet, you and I, all of us, do the same thing, right? When we run after things like sin that are just going to kill us in the end, they might look tasty, they might look like they're going to bring life, but they bring death, and they bring destruction, and they bring brokenness and wrath and sin and everything else to our lives. And so it's a similar concept of like when I'm interacting with someone and they ask me about it, to say, listen, I know it sounds crazy to think Van Gogh would eat paint because it would make him happy, but you do it all the time. You run after things all the time that don't end up tasting good at the end. They end up bringing this poison to you. And so it's one of those things where when people ask you about it, they're like, wow, I did not know I was going to get that much, but it is a powerful, powerful story.
Have you, how often do you engage in these conversations yourself? I mean, I'm assuming you got to be wearing your shirts all the time, right?
Yeah, so I am, and it's funny. It's in my own sin, in my own flesh, there's so many times that I'll wear something and get interacted with that I'm like, dang, like now I got to preach the gospel. And like, I'm just that much of a sinner myself, right? That there's times, just the other day, I was at a meeting at like a Starbucks, and I was wearing one of our shirts is a "Stop Being Dead" on it, in just kind of a repeating form.
Yeah.
And I was in line at Starbucks. There's like 5 people in line behind me. And the girl working behind the counter was like, that is such a cool shirt. What does it mean? And another one of the employees like looks over and goes, wow, that's so cool. So I have 2 employees interacting with me, and they're super busy, and the line's backed up. And I wanted to just say, yeah, and just like walk away and like
you just want to
kind of ignore it, because I was like, this is not the time. Trust me, guys, you don't want to know what this shirt means right now. And so I was like, the Lord just kind of like humbled me, like, no, this is why you have this. This is why you're wearing it. And so I was like, in John 3, Jesus is interacting with them when he tells us that, we're all born, you, me, we're all born dead. Mm-hmm. And like, he came to bring us life, so we don't have to be dead anymore. And she was like, oh, cool. And I was like, yep. And I like got my coffee, and I wanted to be like, you asked for it. Like, that's what it means.
Exactly.
So there's a lot of interactions and situations like that. Even I have a Bear Fruit sticker on my laptop. A ton of people are always like, that is a really cool sticker, but I don't get it. And or they're a Christian, and they're like, hey, that's such a cool sticker. I love it. Like, keep living it. And so it's cool, even from like a Christian perspective, like to have people walk up to me and they can see kind of what I'm doing or what I'm trying to do, and they're like kind of give me like a fist bump, like, hey, keep doing it,
Yeah, exactly.
Which is cool.
No, that happens all the time. I can 100% relate to even just like every now and then we'll put together like these like gospel events and these evangelism events, and where we go and do some like street evangelism and things. And I got to say, with my own sin, like with my own flesh, I never go up into one of those days and I'm like, all right, we get to talk to a whole bunch of strangers. It's always like, oh man, I really don't want to do this today.
Yeah, and
But I have
and
to.
not to even like hijack the this conversation, but something that I'm constantly talking about with the guys that I'm discipling is it's so clear sometimes when I'm trying to preach the gospel that the way I refer to it is it feels like I'm trying to speak a language I don't know that well. It's like I know Spanish because I took it in high school, but like I couldn't really communicate with someone. It would feel like hard and difficult, and like every word feels difficult to find. And I think when I'm not practicing sharing the gospel with people, that's how it feels sharing the gospel. Even though it's something I know deep in my bones and I read about it every day, I pray through it every day, sharing it is like, it's like speaking a foreign language sometimes. Like, and if you're not practicing it, it feels like this heavy lifting all the time. So something I'm constantly encouraging my guys and myself is, we got to practice this. Like, write it down, say it out loud. Like you're talking to yourself. Like, let this be a language we know real well so that we share it naturally.
Speaking of ODGs, I think this was J.I. Packer, but anyway, I think it was him. He would appreciate it even if it wasn't him. So I'll go ahead and attribute it to him. But said, if you're not evangelizing regularly, it's either because you don't believe the gospel or that you don't care about other people. And
yeah,
it's
true.
It's that's spot on, and you're exactly right. If you don't practice it, it's really difficult and it's awkward. And
Yep.
For sure, but it is a hard thing to sort of engage, and that's one of the things I love about your shirts is it sort of forces you to do those things. Do you ever about to put on something or about to open up your laptop or something, and you're thinking like, maybe I'll just wear a different thing today?
No, honestly, because there's a part of me that's just proud that like I'm a part of the company,
Sure.
and it's like, oh, this is cool. Like, this is me. I'm excited. I will say when the conversations come up, that's when my pride and my sin and my like laziness is like, oh man. But I love to push through in those moments. When I can push through and really explain it, that's when I'm like, I don't want it to sound like a checklist, but I like to be able to like lay my head down at night knowing there was an opportunity and I took it, and I preached the gospel. Like, they might not have responded the way that I hope that they did, but like I shared the gospel with someone. And so that's exciting to be in those situations. So yeah, there's definitely laziness and like, dang, I don't know if I want to wear this moments, but usually not when I'm getting dressed in the morning or anything like that.
Well, and it feels awesome, right? Once you've done it, like at the end of the day, when you have been faithful and you have spoken to everyone that's sort of been led your way, and you have been faithful in those interactions, it's such an amazing feeling, right?
Yeah, exactly.
To look back, like you said, it's not a checklist thing. We're not doing that so that we're saved. We're doing that because we're saved, right?
Exactly. So true.
And I think checklists are okay. I keep a checklist. Again, not about salvation. I just want to make sure I've done something every day.
Right? Yeah, it's true.
Cool. So what would you say to someone who is maybe got a crazy idea in their head? Say they're going to like a 9-to-5 job or not even job, not even business related. Say there's somebody who's feels like, I can't really do works. I can't really do these things because I've got, kids and I've got, work going on and I've got all this other stuff. What would you say to someone like that?
There's a couple things. I mean, like even with sharing the gospel or with running this business or whatever it may be, it is so easy to get bogged down in just like the day-to-day, like, oh, well, when I get to it, right? When I get to sharing the gospel, when I get to living my faith out, that's what I'll do. But I think first and foremost is realizing it's in the day-to-day that we're living the gospel, right? So we have to dive head first into the gospel and stop seeing it as this either or thing, right? So I read a book by Tim Keller, Every Good Endeavor, and I can't promote it enough. I think it's such a great book where he talks about the beauty and the holiness and the worshipfulness of going to work and of enjoying work and of enjoying your family and every good endeavor being pointed back to Jesus. And it's like once that clicked in my mind that everything was about the gospel, every moment of my day was about worshiping Jesus in that moment, and that just doing my job well might be worship enough to share the gospel. Not only that, but like that's at least where we need to be starting. So my encouragement to everyone is, to stop viewing it as like this either or, right? Like to live the gospel in the moment that you're living in right now. And that even if God's calling you out to, like, let's say the 9 to 5 kind of grind isn't for you anymore and you feel like the Lord's calling you out, make sure you do that 9 to 5 thing really, really well and with God's glory in mind now, today, even if it's not what you're going to do tomorrow, right? I think so often we have our eyes set somewhere else when God's in his sovereignty called us to that very moment, because if he didn't, we wouldn't be there. And so we have to enjoy and trust the gospel there in that moment and preach and live the gospel in that moment as well. So for me, that was something that was hard even starting this business of, man, should I do this? Should I not do it? It was like, man, I'm already kind of here, right? There's decisions and kind of moments that have happened in my life that I have this company, and at the very least, I know I'm going to be doing it today really, really well with God's glory in mind. Tomorrow, I'll worry about tomorrow, but right now, that's the plan, that's the goal. And I think living that way really understands the James, verses in James where he talks about not looking to a year from now, but looking at today and thinking, Lord willing, we'll do this tomorrow, and just kind of being in that moment.
Exactly. Yeah, no, so I was nodding that entire time, because I think you're spot on. A lot of times we think of, I can't be worshiping God because I've got a job or because I have these other things, when exactly the opposite's true, right? You want to do a phenomenal job at your job because of the gospel, because Christ is, and because of all these things.
Well, and it comes from even just a misunderstanding of God. Sometimes we think God is thinking, all right, fine, go to work. Right? Like that there's these other things that are more holy than going to work or than doing X, Y, or Z. The reality is that's such a limited way of thinking about God and pursuing God. Like, to think of it like there's these moments, and when we're reading our Bible, praying and sharing about God, Jesus, that's when God's really happy with us. And like work, he's like whatever about. But it's like, no, every one of these moments is worship.
Exactly. Even if it's just rolling around playing with the kids.
Exactly.
It's all worship, right?
So true. It's so good.
Very cool. Well, what, in terms of the future for, I know who knows, and we just talked about not thinking about the future.
Yeah.
Actually, scratch that question, right? Okay, I'll ask you a different question. How about, so I've noticed, I subscribe to your emails. Your emails, not really salesy. They have good gospel messages in the email. What's sort of the idea behind that?
So for me, I think, like, in a perfect world, I would be a teacher. Like, I love, and I say a perfect world, like, if God calls me to that, that's where I feel most alive. And so sharing, I'm really aware of who my customer is. My customer right now is looking like an 18 to 24-year-old, right? Those are like most of the people who are showing up on my website or my Instagram or whatever it may be. Sure. And man, if I can preach gospel truth, right? And that's part of it too. I think there's a crazy part of this business that I'm even realizing is, like, part of this business is not only getting my shirts on people who can share the gospel, but man, getting my shirts on people who could understand that part of the gospel as well. Sometimes there's people who are buying my shirts who I think are really resonating with the truth of the shirt more than even thinking about sharing the truth of it, which I think is really cool. So like that to disciple even the people who are like, wow, that is such a cool truth. I've never thought of the gospel that way. Man, I want to buy that shirt so I can wear it and be reminded of that truth every day too. So I think, man, if I can get if someone's saying, I really like this brand, here's my email, because that's really what it is. None of us want to give our email to just anybody.
Sure.
So if someone's like, man, I really buy into what this brand's doing, here's my email, man, I want to make sure that these people are getting the gospel, because, man, if they're not getting that, what's the point, right? If I always say in a lot of my emails, man, if this is just about cool T-shirts for you, please do not buy them. Like, that's not the point. I want there to be this depth and this reality. Like I said earlier, it's all about that. We're going to all die one day, and we're going to stand before Jesus, and we're going to see him, and none of us are going to care about this stuff that we've lived through, right? It's all about that moment. I think about Chronicles of Narnia, where Reepicheep, like, ends up on the other side of the ocean. And I'm like, man, that's it. Like, one day we're going to end up on the other side of this journey, and we're going to see Jesus face to face. And man, if I can get the gospel out in our content and our videos and the stuff that we're putting online, that's really what's going to matter.
Solid. Very cool. Spot on. Nice literary quote. Nice literary reference, by the way.
Thanks.
I saw for the first time today, actually, as I was just looking at the site for research for this, the Damas shirt and the Pilgrim's Progress reference there. That's solid stuff, man.
You're breaking up a little bit. I lost you for a second.
All right, sorry. Am I? Is this coming through?
Yeah, that's better.
All right, very cool. I was just saying I saw today for the first time the Pilgrim's Progress shirt, the Damas shirt. A solid reference. I don't know if that's the reference you were going for, but that's what it made me.
No,
think.
yeah, for sure.
Cool. Well, very cool. So we have our listener base is really more in that like 25, 54-ish range. Which and I'm the old guy on your site, right? I mean, I'm only 30, but still, that of your demo, I'm pushing the upper end.
So am I.
But I can still wear t-shirts, right?
Yeah, I still wear t-shirt. We got to wear t-shirt. My big thing is, listen, you got to wear a shirt. Why not wear one that's going to help you preach the gospel?
Yeah, right. Exactly. Cool. So what sort of message would you have for, again, we're in the middle right now of Mission Upstate, where we're trying to get the gospel out to everyone in the upstate of South Carolina, because we got sort of a weird situation where the population here is growing, but the number of Christians has actually gone down significantly. So it's kind of this great mission field has come to us. So South Carolina is the Bible Belt, right? But where we are specifically is that's going away. And so whereas normally everyone would be, I would just be getting high fives all the time, right?
Yeah, true.
in one of your shirts. Now the mission field is here. And so I think some of your stuff makes it, I don't know, just makes it a nice, easy entryway. Again, especially for the introvert, because you wouldn't have sought out, you just wanted a coffee in Starbucks, right? And,
exactly. I was not looking for a gospel conversation, but I think it helps me. It reminds me that that's what we should be looking for, right?
Right. Exactly. Excuse me, as my voice gets all gargly. Very cool. Is there anything else? Is there anything you'd like to share about your journey? Anything else you'd like to share? Any other message that you have?
I think a big thing with everything that I'm doing with ODG Apparel and with everything is, man, let's take, you talk about getting the gospel to all these different people in upstate, right? Let's be taking every second of our lives and pointing it in that direction, right? Whether it's starting a t-shirt company, whether it's being the best janitor that local high school has, like, let's, man, the big thing for me is, I was an atheist in college, right, for part of it. And then started as a believer, wasn't sure if I believed anything, then the Lord really found me and woke me up. And the thing that I always refer back to is, man, this is either true or it isn't true. And if this is true, how crazy do we have to be to not live like it is? Right? Like, if this is true, we gotta risk everything for it. We have to live every second of every day with that kind of in mind. And if we're not, I wonder if the world looks at us and goes, I don't think you believe this. So when we tell them this is what we believe to be true, I wonder if they look at us and go, it doesn't seem like it's true to you.
Right.
And I want to live a life. I could go in a really long story, but I had a really powerful conversation that changed the entire course of my life with a friend of mine who was an atheist in college. And I shared the gospel with him, and he looked at me and said this to me. He said, Dave, I would believe it if you believed it. And I said, what do you mean? He says, when I look at your life, and I look at what you're telling me and how crazy what you're saying is, that there's this eternal God that is invisible, that sent his son, all these things you're telling me. He's like, man, if I believed that, I would sell everything I had and go to the furthest mountain and tell people about it. He's like, you wouldn't. He's like, so you want to know why I don't believe it? Because I don't think you believe it. And I remember leaving that conversation and thinking to myself, I never want someone to look at my life and say, you don't believe it. I want someone to look at my life and go, man, you're crazy. I don't believe what you believe, but man, you believe it. And so that's kind of how I want to live my entire life. And that's what I would encourage everyone listening. Like, man, let's live lives that people look at and go, I don't necessarily believe what you believe, but you definitely believe it.
So that hits home with me. So I would say I was not a believer until after college. And so I was saved later in life as well, and that was a huge thing for me. Like when I realized this is true, like oh my goodness, like, and then immediately followed that by that was my like, how has nobody told me this? Like why,
Mm.
why wasn't like why is this the first? Why am I like 21 and I had friends that would invite me to church every now and I'd go, just mostly for like lunch afterwards and stuff. And just because living in Greenville, South Carolina, like you're gonna end up in a church. You trip and fall, you end up in a church. And
Yeah, I've been there. I know the area.
and so I had been a few times, but I was like, how is this the first time I'm really hearing the gospel and I'm 21? Like how is this possible? And so yeah, that was I don't know, that just hits home so much because yeah, once you realize it's true, that changes everything. That changes absolutely everything. Cool. Yeah. No. So how on earth did you? So you came to faith after majoring in philosophy? Because I didn't think that was
So
possible.
yeah, so I grew up in the church, and my family comes from a really maybe not the best Christian heritage. Very kind of like, in my opinion, prosperity gospel centered and sort of theologically all over the place. And so when I went to college kind of all jacked up from that and just didn't know what I believed. And by God's grace, I became a religion philosophy major at a non-Christian school. So all my teachers made me feel dumb every day of the week. And all of my friends were hardcore, like evangelistic atheists. So it wasn't just enough for them to be atheists. Like they had to make sure I wasn't a Christian too. And so I just had everything I was interacting with every day was about making me not believe what I believed. And so I went through 2 years of just all over the place, partying, and just really just felt like, man, I don't know what I believe. I don't know why I wake up in the morning. It's so crazy. And then I remember this story I use all the time, this illustration is this drum beat, this 2 a.m., 3 a.m., the party's over, and I just have this drum, this loud noise in my head of like banging, like why? What's the point of all this, right? So if there is no God, if I'm wrestling with, man, is there a God? Is any of this true? All my identity was wrapped up in the church growing up. I went to college, I'm like, I don't think I believe this anymore because all my teachers are telling me it doesn't exist, and all my friends are telling me it doesn't exist. But then what's the point? Then why do I wake up? And so I remember showing up to my classes at the end of my sophomore year, probably my worst year, really questioning like, okay, I get it, guys. Everything is confusing and God probably doesn't exist, but then what's the point? And they'd be like, what do you mean? I'm like, okay, but then why do we get up in the morning? Like if suffering and horrible things are happening every day, right? And because they're happening, we don't think God exists, then why do you get up in the morning? If I know I'm just going to have a crappy life and then die, why do any of us get up tomorrow?
Yeah.
And no one would have an answer. They would just keep asking questions. Well, what if? No, not what if. What's the point? Tell me. Like, there's an answer. Everything has an answer. 2 + 2 = 4. What's the true black and white answer of this? How did we get here? Why are we here? The whole thing. And so I just started reading, Gandhi and philosophers and the Quran and the Bible for the first time really in my whole life. And it was like I started to see Jesus in the Gospels, and I was like, wow, this is different than what I grew up hearing. Mm-hmm. Jesus is way like more like, it's my way or the highway. Jesus was way more like truth and power and just like that, barbarian sort of, king that I would see in the Gospels. And I was like, wow, he's like not joking around. And so it just hit me one day, man, I think I believe in Jesus. There's just nothing else that points anywhere but him. And then it's all just been ever since that.
Amen. Very cool. Yeah, I don't think enough can be said. That's one of the great things about evangelizing too, especially I've found with like older people who grew up in a culture where it was, Christians all around them and all they've ever known is Christians and all their friends are Christians and all they've ever been in is in that atmosphere. When they start to have to defend the faith against challenges, that sort of like opens up this whole other realm of like what it means to be Christian and what Christianity is. Because when you have to start defending it and figuring out like, why do I believe this? Why does anybody believe anything? That is such a crucial part, I think, of understanding like an actual like living faith.
So true.
Very cool. Well, all right, man. Well, thank you very much. I think I really appreciate you being on.
No, of course. I had a blast, and I'm glad to do it.
Very cool.